Kay's story. They were comfortable sitting in wooden rocking armchairs by the fireplace. The evening was cold, like the announcement of autumn. The long-desired rest gave Aristasia an unspeakable pleasure. In addition, Kay sat next to her. As usual, his dark hair was carefully pulled back. Leaning back and relaxed, he hummed something under his nose. This was a rare sight these days. They were behind the curtain, at the place where Aristasia felt at home. A refuge and shelter, where after a whole year of wandering and dangers, she could sleep peacefully in a warm bed, without worrying if she woke up in the morning. She could sleep deeply and dream. Dreams rarely came to her, so she was glad that the gateway to the world of nighttime imagery would once again open before her. Together with Kay, they returned from the borderlands, where a gang of hideous goblins wreaked havoc. They were ambushed after several weeks of preparation. The elf felt her broken ribs while breathing, when one of the creatures caught her and tried to crush her. The goblins had great strength, but were not wise, and that was not a good combination. Kay saved her by attacking her attacker, but he was hit in the face. He had a swelling the size of a chicken egg on his left cheek. And yet he hummed under his nose the melody of one of the dirty, grubby chants. "All right, I didn't know you liked these songs," she pronounced quietly. "It's good for the brothels." "So what?" he asked jokingly. "You don't look like them." He laughed. "Are you going to overwinter here?" she asked him. He thought for a moment. "I don't know. Maybe. I don't want to get tangled up in another winter in snowstorms and snowdrifts trying to track the lost. It has no effect." Aristasia looked at him with sparkling eyes. "Oh, come on, Kay. Responsibilities. Are you saying you want to give up? And who has been reprimanding me for the last 200 years to move my ass, dragging me through the woods, forcing me to keep making an effort? I am afraid that after such a school, I cannot sit still." She joked, but he remained serious. "I am tired, Aristasia. Yes, it has been a difficult day. Maybe it would be better if we went to bed," she proposed. "That is not what I am talking about," he got up suddenly. "I am talking about these duties." He started to walk and gesture with his hands. "You see, I have been doing my duty almost 50 years more than you. How many days can there be? The same problems, the same fights, the same escapes. I am tired of my function. I would like to have a pupil already," he said quietly. Aristasia was stunned. Kay, the perfect, good, and noble Kay, was saying that he doesn't want to be a guardian anymore. Her mentor, friend, and guide. No, that's impossible. It's not him. "What are you—" She started talking, but he interrupted her. "I have seen too much. I have seen the scourges of diseases that have sifted through the population of that country. Wars so terrible that the mere mention of a slaughter freezes the blood in my veins. I have been friends with many of the guardians. How many brothers and sisters were there? How many of them have already died? How many people, creatures unknown to me, could not be saved because I chose another way? Wait a minute. You cannot accuse yourself of someone else's death because of your choices. Life is one big choice. You cannot choose in one time period several times. We are just—" She stopped thinking at next words. "Well, who are we? Sister, I have lived for so long that I began to wonder who I am. What have I become? I feel that I have done my job perfectly well, but sometimes I have doubts because no one can assure me of the rightness of my thinking and acting." "Maybe you're considering too many things." "You once told me," he interrupted her, "that I cannot judge anyone properly because I only see the good things in everyone and idealize their actions." "Come on, I wanted to be smart-ass, because you always pointed out my aversion to dwarves because of my origin," she snorted with irritation. He shook his head. "I simply want to see this goodness. I am trying to see it in everyone, to justify the evil that I have done," he said weakly. "What evil could you have possibly done? Everyone made mistakes. It's our role to make a lot of decisions. Not every one of them is right. You're thinking too much about this." He sat down and hid his face in his hands. When he spoke again, his voice trembled. "Fiara did not tell you how the previous Guardian of Fire chose me?" She raised her eyebrows questioningly. "I was born in a small village on today's merchant trail. At that time, there was no merchant's route, only arable land, between which there were some villages, that was several houses and homesteads. My family made a living from the fruits of the land and from the breeding of flocks. We did not stand out from the others. I had 4 siblings, 3 brothers and 1 sister. We all worked from morning to night with our father in the field. The sister stayed at home with mother. One day when we were coming back from the field, we saw smoke from afar. I let myself run in that direction. Our village was burnt to the ground. There was ruin from the house. The charred bodies that we found inside were indistinguishable. Everything has changed since that day. The father buried my mother and sister. Those neighbors who survived because they were in the field, as we were on that day, started to rebuild their houses and helped each other. But I did not stay to see it. I left. I couldn't live in this place any longer. It hurt me to look at the burnt ground, at the graves of my loved ones. It also awoke another feeling: anger. I wanted revenge. So I wandered from village to village, and I found a similarity to mine: burned to the bare ground. I began to inquire about the cause, about the perpetrators. Nobody saw anyone. No one heard the sound of the horses' hooves. No one saw their tracks. How many times I walked and looked in each of these places looking for signs. There was nothing. People said it was the evil will of the god of fire. I did not know this god, but I started to hate him for the wrongs and so much suffering. They told me all sorts of stories about how gods incarnate in the bodies of the living and do their business on earth. Eventually, they began to look at me suspiciously, asking where I was from. I told them that I was walking in the footsteps of burnt villages. They looked with increasing surprise, less and less willing to talk, until the rumor went out that I should be feared. The bad fame that I did not ascribe to myself was getting further and further, and the trace of the burnt ground got longer and longer. Every house was in danger. People began to flee behind city walls. I began to take a closer look at myself. One morning I woke up in the forest near the village, which was still full in the evening, and at dawn the smoke was already hovering over it. I ran away. I was scared. I once drank from a watering hole by the road. Someone stopped by me, a low, fat, balding dwarf with a tan beard. He jumped off the pony and came up to me, looking at me strangely, and said, "It's good that I found you, because I thought I couldn't make it and you'd burn them all." Irstea looked at him carefully and asked him, "Was it you? You were destroying all those houses?" "Yes," he replied with a broken voice. In his gray eyes she saw tears, or rather the god of fire, who used my body. When I was sleeping, he would invade my body and burn the villages. That is why I was always around until the people there saw this convergence. So it wasn't you, but the god of fire. You asked him now, when you know the prayer of the guardians, why did he do it? I ask every day, and I have not heard an answer. He hung his head. That is my crime. That's not true, she replied certainly. You were not yourself. You didn't control your own body. That is how I explain it to myself, he smiled sadly, which does not change the fact that there is blood on these hands. He showed her his clean, neat hands and looked at them with disgust. She changed the subject. That dwarf who found you...
My predecessor. He followed my footsteps. He knew something was wrong. After his prayer, God of Fire stopped impersonating me. But that disgust remained. It is an abomination of the crimes committed by my body. I have spent my whole life trying to atone for it. But it is probably not enough for the world if I am still a guardian.
If you think about it, Anastasia was thinking loud, there is something really wrong with us. Kay sent her a questioning look. You said it yourself, she smiled comfortingly at him. We are still the guardians, for several centuries. How many of our sisters and brothers have already ruled the rest of the elements? And the guardians of air must have broken the record. The last one was the guardian for only 3 years. He smiled at her. Sometimes I think that fire holds the guardians the longest, because they are the people who are taught humility and patience by this power. After all, we are the opposite of our element. If we were different, impulsive, dynamic, we would quickly exhaust its power within ourselves. She nodded her head and added, "Thank you for sharing your story with me. It is important to me." He knelt before her. He took her hands and kissed them. She looked at his beloved face with shining eyes. "You are my dearest friend, Anastasia. I'm living with this dark truth. But I'm grateful for you. You're my only family and someone who needs to know the truth about me. All of it. Why? He squeezed her hands, his gaze was sad again. Because if I didn't have a person who knows me, it's like I never existed. And my life would not mean much more than a grain of sand in the hourglass of time.